Welcome back to the Archive Network. Aurelius here, with Malik, curators of the Treaty Archive. We left United Nations Charter last time added times. It seemed the conference would collapse under the weight of competing interests. Today we pick up where we left off. 50 flags fluttered in San Francisco, yet the real drama unfolded behind closed doors. The fate of a new world order rested on those negotiations. From April 25, 1945, the delegates gathered at the War Memorial Opera House. They were determined to avoid the mistakes of the League of Nations and forge a lasting peace.
Aurelius, your focus on the grand narrative really misses the human costs lurking behind those closed doors. Every delegate represented a nation, sure, but they also carried the weight of their people's suffering. There were real lives at stake, not just political ideologies or strategies. The pressure to deliver was immense, and the stakes were painfully real. Think about the families waiting for news, the hopes and dreams hinging on those discussions. It's easy to forget the faces behind the decisions.
You're right about the stakes. The principal players were clear: Stettinius, Molotov, Eden, Soong, and Bidot. Each came with their national interests firmly in mind. Stettinius balanced Roosevelt's idealism with the harsh realities of global politics, often finding himself torn between lofty aspirations and tangible outcomes. Molotov, with the USSR's pride at stake, viewed every clause as a potential threat, deeply suspicious of the West's intentions. This was a high-stakes game of chess, and every move mattered.
But it wasn't just about the big names. We can't forget the smaller nations. They were terrified of being sidelined again, just like they were during the League of Nations. The fear that a new oligarchy might emerge was palpable. Those who had suffered under imperialism were desperate to be heard, to share their stories and struggles. You could feel the weight of their voices, longing for acknowledgement, and a real place at the table where decisions were being made.
True, but the reality was stark. The major powers made it clear. Without veto power, they would walk away. The shadow of their armies loomed large, a constant reminder of their might. A compromise was necessary. So, we ended up with the 5 permanent members and their vetoes. This decision didn't just settle matters for the moment. It laid the groundwork for how nations would interact for decades. It was a game of chess, and the stakes were nothing less than global stability.
Compromise. Or capitulation. For the smaller nations, it felt like a bitter pill to swallow. They couldn't shake the feeling that their concerns would always take a back seat to the priorities of the major powers. The veto gave a sense of security to a select few. But what was the price for everyone else? The very ideals of equality they had fought for were already hanging by a thread, leaving ordinary people caught in the crossfire, wondering if their voices would ever truly matter.
You raise a valid point. However, beyond security, the horrors of the Holocaust forced human rights onto the global agenda in a way we hadn't seen before. For the first time, nations debated their obligations not just to one another, but also to their own citizens. This was a radical departure from the League of Nations' focus on intergovernmental relations, where discussions often overlooked the needs of individuals. We began to grapple with the idea that human dignity must be at the forefront.
Radical, yes, but it wasn't just about the rhetoric. Crafting the right language was a monumental task. Delegates often floundered, caught between making strong commitments and showing respect for national sovereignty. This struggle for clarity revealed deeper tensions, ones that could easily derail any hope for progress. You could see it in their faces, the weight of their decisions. Each word mattered, not just for the future, but for real people whose lives hung in the balance.
The Economic and Social Council emerged as a bold step forward in our collective journey. It recognized that conflict often stems from poverty and inequality, not just political disputes. We were tasked with coordinating global efforts in health, education, and development. This wasn't merely about preventing war. It was about reshaping the core of society. We aimed for a world where cooperation was the norm, where nations worked together to lift each other up and create lasting change.
But let's not forget the many obstacles we faced along the way. Language barriers and cultural misunderstandings created real friction among delegates. They worried that translations might distort their true intentions, leading to even more confusion. These challenges really brought out the human side of diplomacy, where a simple miscommunication could unravel years of trust building and hard work. It's a reminder that at the heart of these negotiations are real people, each with their own hopes and fears.
Exhaustion and frustration did threaten the process, but we all knew the stakes. The memory of war loomed large and public expectations weighed heavily on the delegates. They had to find common ground. After 2 long months of negotiations, a breakthrough finally occurred on June 26, 1945. Representatives from 50 nations came together and signed the United Nations Charter. This moment marked not just a document, but a collective hope for a more peaceful future.
Signing the charter was a moment of celebration, sure, but it felt like just a piece of paper at that time. The institutions it created were still untested, and doubts hung in the air. Would the UN really be effective when the next crisis hit? The real challenge lay ahead, and everyone was watching closely, holding their breath. Behind every decision made, there were real lives at stake, and that reality was heavy on our hearts.
At times it seemed the conference would collapse under the weight of competing interests. The Soviet Union and Western powers danced a delicate ballet, each trying to outmaneuver the other. Tensions rose as accusations flew, and the air was thick with doubt. Yet somehow, against all odds, they reached an agreement. It was a fragile peace, built on the lessons of the past. For now, it held, but history shows us that such agreements can easily unravel.
That's where we leave it this time. United Nations Charter continues. The story isn't finished yet. Find the full series on the Treaty Archive, part of the Archive Network. We'll be back with the next chapter.